Hello everyone, and welcome to Lost in Localization. In this series, I, a Japanese teacher, cover all the interesting things in games that lost their meaning after being localized for an English-speaking audience. This includes accurate pronunciation, hidden meanings and references in the design and naming of characters and places, inaccurate or impossible translations, and anything else that I consider noteworthy. If there's something I've missed, please let me know and I'll quote and credit you in a pinned comment below. My Japanese friend Haruka will be providing her native Japanese pronunciation, so if you enjoy this video, please like, subscribe, share, and or support on Patreon, like these amazing people here who chose to contribute after seeing my Japanese explanation videos in which I break down every single sentence in a video game. So far, I've covered GoldenEye 007, Banjo-Kazooie, Super Mario 64, and all the 3D Zeldas up to Twilight Princess. Have a look at my channel's playlists if that's something you're interested in. Also, if you'd like help with Japanese grammar, resources, or study methods, email me at the address in the description. With all that out the way, I'm Norki, and this is Lost in Localization, a link to the past. First, here's a list of commonalities in A Link to the Past and prior games in the series that I've already covered. And now, onto the title, which is
神々のトライフォース
Triforce of the Gods in Japanese. The English version was heavily altered to remove many allusions to religion, and this resulted in even the game's title being changed to A Link to the Past. The quicker way of saying the Japanese title is
神トラ
Reading the different versions' manuals reveals many differences between them. The first is the presence of a map in Japanese and the lack of one in English. In the pages describing Hyrule's creation, the English reads that the god of courage used justice and vigor when creating life. But the Japanese explains that they used a
優しくたくましい心
caring and strong heart. The Triforce is described as having the power to bestow 3 titles: the Forger of Strength, the Keeper of Knowledge, and the Juror of Courage. But the titles are a little different in Japanese. The Forger of Strength was originally
力を支配するもの
the Ruler of Power. The Keeper of Knowledge was
知恵を司るもの
the Master in Wisdom. And the Juror of Courage was
勇気を鍛えるもの
the Forger of Courage. The location of the Triforce is the
聖地
or Sacred Realm in Japanese, but was changed to Golden Land in English. It's written that the Hylians were
神の声を聞くことができる選ばれた民
chosen people who could hear the voices of the gods, and who,
それゆえ高い耳を持ち
for that purpose, had long ears. The English manual attributes some of its background lore, most notably this verse, to the Book of Medora, a fictional in-game book. This change is very understandable when you learn that the Japanese manual attributes some of its lore to the
創世記
Book of Genesis. The name for the Book of Medora in the game code,
辞書
or dictionary, suggests that it was merely intended by the developers as a translation tool for the in-game Hylian glyphs, not a history book. We also see a few liberties taken in the English localization, one of which is that some of the remaining Hylian buildings in Hyrule were said to house the Triforce, which is not mentioned in Japanese. 2 more are taken in the naming of the leader of thieves who betrays his followers to have his wish granted by the Triforce, Ganondorf Dragmire, better known as Mandrag Ganon. Again, neither is mentioned in Japanese. Instead, we read
ガノンドロフ、
as his true name, which somewhat resembles
ガンダルフ、
Gandalf, and
魔盗族ガノン、
demon thief Ganon for his alias. Furthermore, the Japanese adds that
ハイラルを脅かした邪悪の王ガノンはまさにこの時誕生した。
this is undoubtedly the moment that Ganon, King of Evil, first appeared. In reference to the moment Ganondorf used the Triforce to make his wish and transformed into a bull-like demon. The English manual also changes
7人の賢者たち、
the seven sages to seven wise men. Reasonable in that it minimizes religious connotations, but slightly presumptuous in that the Japanese does not specify a gender for these individuals. Further down the page, the English explains that the Master Sword was forged because the people suspected Ganon's power was based on the Triforce's magic. But the Japanese explains
ハイラル人は神のお告げでトライフォースをかどわかす魔を撃退する大魔の剣を作りました。
the Hylians forged an evil-repelling sword when advised to by divine prophecy. More religious elements were removed in the next section, with
信心深い民たち、
deeply faithful people becoming simply people, and
民衆は神に祈るほかありませんでした。
the people had no choice but to pray to the gods was replaced with the king offered rewards. Aghanim is said to have appeared
彗星のごとく、
like a comet in Japanese, while he merely responded to the king's summons in English. In return for saving Hyrule from pestilence and drought, he was awarded the title of
司祭、
priest in Japanese, while in English he was given the non-clerical title of chief advisor. On page 7, the game's opening is outlined, with Zelda requesting help telepathically from the cell in which she's been imprisoned. Issue 155 of Famitsu magazine summarizes the series' timeline up to this point and asserts that the princess in this game is the first Zelda, the same one from Adventure of Link, and different to the one in the series' first entry. Page 8's Japanese equivalent reads that one goal of the adventure is to have your wish granted by the Triforce, which wasn't included in English. The pages that explain about file management include screenshots of the file select screen with the name Dan entered on file 3. This most likely refers to Daniel Alson, who's credited as the localizer, and who probably included his own name in screenshots that he himself created. Similarly, the name
レロン、
is entered into file 3 on the file explanation page of the official Japanese strategy guide. Initially, I thought these were nonsensical hiragana characters, but after looking them up on jisho.org just in case, I learned of Laron Lee, a legendary baseball player who played 8 seasons in the MLB before relocating to Japan to play 11 seasons, where he also held the record for career batting average from his retirement in 1987 until early 2018. It's possible that a contributor to the official guide was a baseball fan and included Lee's name in the screenshots as an Easter egg. The Japanese explanation of the subscreen categorizes the map, compass, and big key as
神器、
sacred treasures. The same word is used for 3 legendary Japanese treasures with mythical histories: a mirror,
ヤタの鏡、
a sword,
天の村雲の剣、
and a jewel.
八坂にの勾玉。
All 3 are symbolically presented to Japan's emperors during their enthronements. It's possible that the Master Sword, Magic Mirror, and Moon Pearl were inspired by these. The controller explanation is way more colourful in Japanese, owing to the colours of the buttons of the 2 territories' controllers being different. European controllers were the same as the Japanese ones. The Japanese controls explanation about holding B to ready Link's sword goes into more detail than the English equivalent, explaining that
側面を防御しながら
while protecting himself from the side with the shield,
剣を突き出します。
Link will hold his sword out. A useful tip for defending yourself while charging the spin attack. The flute was originally named ocarina, and its explanation is much more cryptic in Japanese.
オカリナはある場所で使うことによって初めてその効果を発揮できるようになります。
By first using the ocarina in a certain place, you'll activate its full abilities. The English version specifies that the instrument is linked to the flute boy and that you'll need his avian friend to fly you around Hyrule. The cane of Burner is called the
バイラの杖
cane of Baira in Japanese, possibly an anagram of
バリア
the English word barrier. Interestingly, an early name for this item during development was
ナザレの杖
cane of Nazareth, and the cane of Samaria was called the
ソロモンの杖
cane of Solomon, both of which are biblical references. The armor is actually just called
服
or clothes in Japanese, and the explanation was slightly mistranslated. The Japanese reads,
受けるダメージがそれぞれ2分の1、4分の1に減ります。
the damage you take from enemies is reduced to 1/2 and then to 1/4. The English reads that the damage is reduced by 25% and then by 50%. The Japanese name for the Pegasus shoes is
靴
which was correctly translated, but the Japanese manual uses the English word boots above its explanation. And the power upgrades are called
パワーグラブ
and
パワフルグラブ
in Japanese. Seems the devs thought powerful was a level above power. The original Japanese explanation of the moon pearl reads,
トライフォースの力を操る水晶玉
a crystal ball that uses the power of the Triforce, while the English translation reads that the moon pearl protects its bearer from the power of the Triforce. The English explanation of the fairies refers to the large one as the Fairy Queen, but the Japanese just calls her an
大きな妖精
large fairy. The Japanese manual explains that it will use the word dungeon as a catch-all name for underground labyrinths, the castle, towers, and temples. But the English manual mistranslated temples as the sanctuary, which isn't a dungeon. Page 34 of the English manual reads that the steps are not displayed on the map, but the Japanese reads
段差
meaning elevation differences are not displayed. The English manual quotes the Book of Medora as the source for the tips given on pages 42 and 43, as if past Hylian prophets already knew the events of the game, but the Japanese manual just gives the tips from the manual's author. The English ones also remove religious elements such as the
教会
church being changed to sanctuary and the
神父
priest changing to sage. Next, in the bestiary, the Stalfos Knight is called the
スタルフォン
and boss of the skeleton soldiers in Japanese. The Geldman is
ゲルドマン
furthering the series' tradition of using Gerudo to seemingly mean desert dwelling. The Snapdragon,
ガプラ
in Japanese, is described as being the result of a mad alchemist's plant experiments in English, but its Japanese explanation reads,
植物から進化した
meaning it evolved from plants. Its name as an entity in the game code is PAKKN, suggesting the devs thought of it as a link to the past's version of the Pakun flower, the Japanese word for piranha plant. Finally, the Japanese manual advertises the official guide, which was released in 2 parts, both of which I now own. The Hyrule Historia would retroactively change some of these words back to their literal Japanese translations, which is how I'll be referring to them throughout this video. So, for example, I'll be saying church instead of sanctuary, temples instead of palaces, and 7 sages instead of 7 wise men. After entering a name on the file screen, Link is awoken by Zelda telepathically calling for help, which his uncle also hears. Despite being a descendant of the knights who fought in the so-called imprisoning war, his uncle seems to fatally wound himself falling into this secret passage. Then again, I suppose it's possible that the knights of legend also acted as mere cannon fodder while the sages erected their barrier. He gives Link a sword and shield, and in the English version says, "Zelda is your," before succumbing to fall damage. This caused native English speakers to wonder what relationship Link has with Princess Zelda. But in Japanese he says,
お前は姫の
meaning you are the princesses, seemingly omitting the words last hope or something similar. While making his way to Zelda's cell, Link encounters the castle guards who have become hostile due to Aghanim's magic. To unlock the cell, he has to defeat a soldier wielding a ball and chain, who the 154th issue of Famitsu suggests may be a skeleton beneath his armor. When Link speaks to Zelda, she says, "I had a feeling you were getting close." But in Japanese she says,
あなたが近づいてくるのを感じていたわ
meaning she could literally feel his getting closer. During their escape, Link has to fight off rats, ropes, and keys. When they arrive at the church, the priest and Zelda give Link some background information. At one point, Zelda says, "You can do it. You can," which is more empowering in Japanese.
あなたならきっとできるあなたなら
Only you can prevail. Only you. And if Link talks to her again before leaving, she says,
あなたの無事をお祈りしているわ
"I'm praying for your safety," a religious sentiment that was removed in English. After leaving, Link can explore quite a lot of the overworld straight away. There are Poes in the graveyard, thieves in the Lost Woods, buzzblobs near the magic shop, Octoroks, and Armos near the Eastern Temple, crows, toppos, and hoarders in this field, sand crabs, Zora, and the world's only octoballoon around Lake Hylia, and vultures, and Geldman, or Gerudoman, in the desert, which is called the
怪しの砂漠
in Japanese, desert of danger rather than desert of mystery. Poes are believed to be named after American author Edgar Allan Poe, best known for his gothic horror works. While this has not been confirmed by Nintendo, there's a Poe called Alan in Oracle of Ages whose name further supports this theory. Issue 154 of Famitsu notes the Buzzblob's resemblance to Hattifatana from Moomin, which are called
ニョロニョロ
slithering in Japanese. The Buzzblob's entity name in the game code is also Nyoro. When Link acquires the magic powder, he can sprinkle it on them to turn them into Cukemen, who give advice in the forms of puns in Japanese. First they say,
サハスラーラを探すラーラ
where
探す
means to search for something. Then they say,
サハスラーラを見つけたのさすがラーラ
where
さすが
is a positive expression meaning just as I'd expect from you. The sand crab's in-game name is
ピース
in Japanese, perhaps a variation of the word pierce that was changed to fit nicely with keys. The vultures are called
テンドル
in the Japanese game, a variation of
コンドル
which is the katakanaization of condor. The average middle-aged man found near the desert is called the
変なおじさん
weird middle-aged man in Japanese. His sign reads,
私に話しかけないで
"Don't talk to me.
私は変なおじさんです
I'm a weird guy.
立て札を抜いたりしないでください
Please don't mess with my sign." Much more specific requests than in English. Amusingly, trying to enter caves while he's following you prompts him to say,
私と一緒じゃ入れないよ。
You can't enter with me, which went unchanged for the inanimate objects like the super bomb and the treasure chest. Inside this cave near the desert is an old man whose name is
アジナ
with a soft G. His name is similar to an adjective in Japanese meaning clever, which the 152nd issue of Famitsu uses to make a pun in its section covering him.
アジナじいさん、アジナマネを。
You'd be smart to do as Ajina says. But, to advance through the game, Link is supposed to go to Kakariko Village, which I suspect is named after a rooster's crow, given that there are always chicken-like birds present in its various iterations throughout the series. It sounds somewhat like words used to represent the sound in several languages. Cock-a-doodle-doo,
Kikiriku,
Cocorico,
and
コケコッコ、
in Japanese, the latter portion of which
コッコ。
was used for the bird's name in the series. Sprinkling magic powder on this one turns it into a human, who then says,
人間の姿も結構不便。
meaning being a human kinda sucks, where
結構、
meaning kinda is a pun on the rooster call. The inn in the village is called
酒場。
bar in Japanese, and Sahasrara's wife's entity name is JOHBB, a possible shortening of
情報ババ。
or information granny. The sick boy who gives Link the bug-catching net has the entity name SINUB, which could mean dying boy. The street merchant who sells you an empty bottle has an odd tendency to say
ある、
and
よろし。
at the end of his sentences, a feature of Yokohama Pidgin Japanese, which was used as a means of communication between Japanese natives and foreign traders, particularly those from China, in the late 19th century. The Chinese character Shampoo from the 1987 manga series
ランマ2分の1。
is a possible contemporary inspiration for the street merchant's speech. To the south are feuding twins and a maze game. When Link fails to clear the maze within a certain time, the man at the end says,
不合格。
meaning unsuccess or failure, which got oddly translated as you're not qualified. The success message is similarly odd. Strangely, the music for this area is different between versions. In the English version, it has the same music as Kakariko Village, but in Japanese it has the regular overworld music. To the north is the fortune teller. In Japanese, they start their readings with either
ネアンデルタール、
Neanderthal or
クロマニオン、
Cro-Magnon, which are both extinct species of human. These words were changed to the equally meaningless hocus pocus and abracadabra alakazam for the English version. Just north of Kakariko Village is the lumberjack's hut. Their names in Japanese are
A 作、
and,
B 作、
which led to a joke in Famitsu issue 154 that their surname could be
佐藤、
in reference to Eisaku Sato, a former prime minister of Japan. Near their hut is a sign that reads,
勝手にヘブラ山に入ることを禁止します。
I forbid you from entering Mount Hebra of your own accord, which I believe was slightly mistranslated in that the English sign has Death Mountain written on it. Mount Hebra is the Light World mountain, and Death Mountain is its Dark World equivalent. Speaking of
ヘブラ山、
or Mount Hebra, the word for Hebrew, the language in which the Bible was first written, is
ヘブライ語、
in Japanese, a possible inspiration for the mountain's name. Sahasrara can be found in this shack near the Eastern Temple. The 156th issue of Famitsu refers to him as
村長、
meaning village chief. He's surprised to hear that Link is seeking the Master Sword and tells him to go to the nearby
神殿、
temple, not palace. Inside, Link encounters Bubbles, Popo, Stalfos, and the Igor, whose name is
アイゴール
in Japanese, potentially a combination of the English words eye and goal, in reference to its eye being the target for defeating it. The tiles on the floor in the dungeon resemble the Star of David in Japanese, but were changed in the English version, presumably to minimize religious associations. The bosses of the dungeon
デグアモス
continue the series tradition of prefixing standard enemy names with Degu to mean mega. The guide makes reference to
カゴメカゴメ
a children's game that's somewhat similar to Ring-a-Ring-a Roses, in which the center child covers their eyes, while the surrounding children rotate around them, much like the bosses do. The surrounding children sing a song, and when it's finished, the center child guesses who is directly behind them. I also learned online from a Japanese guide that the bosses can actually be damaged by the boomerang, but it takes 48 hits to destroy just one. After acquiring the Pendant of Courage and returning to Sahasrara, Link gets the Pegasus shoes, with which he can run fast and knock things from high places. They're required to get the Book of Medora, which is needed to read some of the Hylian inscriptions dotted around the overworld. The Hylian in-game consists of the same few symbols, which were different between versions. More were made that went unused, and issue 156 of Famitsu uses similar symbols to, presumably, write Zelda on the introduction page before its featured guide. Medora in Japanese also happens to match the katakanaization of mudra, spiritual hand gestures in Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism. It's interesting that using the Book of Medora to translate the Hylian inscriptions often results in Link performing a hand gesture to effect change supernaturally. The Japanese inscription before the desert temple uses the word
念ずる
which includes to pray in its definitions, and which was carefully translated to wish for the English version. Inside the desert temple, Link encounters levers, Beamos, flying tiles, and devalents, which the guide and Famitsu refer to as
アリ地獄
a word for antlions, which literally translates as ant hell. Following this logic, its name is surely a shortening of devil and ant, and should have therefore been romanized as Devil Ant. The dungeon item is the Power Glove, and the boss is 3 Lanmola. After defeating them, Link acquires the Pendant of Power and can now access areas in the overworld blocked by light stones. One of these stones blocks a cave in which a bandit tells Link,
止まった敵をやっつけると
if you defeat paralyzed enemies,
ルピーがよく出るよ
they'll often produce rupees. This tip was all but lost in English, where the key point of the enemies being motionless is not specified. The Power Glove also allows Link to visit King Zora in the northeast of Hyrule and purchase the flippers so he can swim in deep water, which opens up more areas. One of these is the
不思議の泉
Mystery Fountain, which was changed to Mysterious Pond in English. Venus, the Queen of Fairies, can strengthen Link's shield and boomerang here. Her entity name is BWAKO, which resembles
琵琶湖
or Lake Biwa in Japan's Shiga prefecture. Or it could be something along the lines of
美人若い子
beautiful young lady. Only the programmers know for sure. The Japanese guide refers to her as a
女神
or goddess. Another area Link can now enter is the
幸せの泉
Fountain of Happiness, which was also translated as pond for the English version. As he throws rupees in, the game randomly produces a message to let him know how lucky he is. These are similar to fortunes one can receive from a Japanese temple at the start of the new year.
大吉
Great luck,
中吉
good luck,
小吉
little luck, and
大凶
great misfortune. And to continue his quest, Link needs to head to the Tower of Hera on Mount Hebra. With the Power Glove, he can lift the rock blocking the entrance to a cave that leads up there. On the way, he runs into an old man, encounters dead rocks, and risks being hit by boulders. I wonder if the dead rocks were designed based on the English letters L and R being katakanaized as the same symbol in Japanese. This means that the English words dead rock and deadlock are written and pronounced exactly the same in Japanese, which may have led the designers to create a rock-like enemy that simply freezes when attacked, creating a deadlock between them and Link. Link gets the magic mirror from the old man and uses a portal on the top of Mount Hebra to warp to the
闇の世界
Dark World, where he immediately runs into an NPC who's kicking another around. The ball-like NPC seems to be enjoying it, but there's graphical data in the game that shows them crying, which I'm very glad went unused. As he rolls around, he says
ゴロンゴロン
which is onomatopoeia for the sound of rolling. This would of course become the inspiration for the naming of a certain other race in future Zelda games. Inside the Tower of Hera, Link encounters mini Molderm, hard hat beetles, Guru Guru bars, and Kodongo. The mini Molderm are actually called
テール
in Japanese, a mere katakanaization of tail. A different enemy has the name Molderm in the Japanese version, which I'll get to later. The Guru Guru bars are so named because Guru Guru is a Japanese onomatopoeic adverb for spinning. The Kodongo's name means baby Dodongo, much like how
猫
means cat and
犬
means dog, with
子猫
meaning kitten and
子犬
meaning puppy. Link also acquires the Moon Pearl, allowing him to maintain his original form in the Dark World, and must defeat
デグテール
Megatail to get the Pendant of Wisdom. The official guide describes Megatail as
スターリン戦車より硬い装甲を持っている
having armor that's tougher than a Starlin tank's. Issue 157 of Famitsu magazine makes a similar comparison regarding the Helmasaur King's armor, so it seems to be somewhat of a standard comparison in Japanese. With all three pendants, Link is now able to pull the Master Sword from its pedestal. When he does so, he hears Sahasrara's voice praising his efforts and encouraging him to face Aghanim. He then hears Zelda calling for help from the church. He goes to investigate, but is too late, finding only the priest, who seems to die after telling him that Zelda must be on the top floor of the castle tower. When Link arrives there, Aghanim sacrifices Zelda and opens the gates between the light and dark worlds. They do battle, and Aghanim drags Link into the dark world with him just before being defeated. Sahasrara contacts Link telepathically again and explains that the Dark World was formerly known as the
聖地
Sacred Land. He tasks Link with rescuing the Seven Maidens and advises him to head for the
闇の神殿
Dark Temple first. In the Dark World's overworld are many new enemies. Moblins, which the guide describes as
下っ端
meaning low-ranking individual, hinox, snapdragons, stal, roper, which the guide describes as
イソギンチャク
or sea anemones, and zero, which has the entity name PATA0, suggesting they were considered to be this game's incarnation of Patra during development. Others are counterparts to Lightworld monsters, such as the Zora-like Ku, the Octorok-like Slarok, and the like Picket. Slarok is likely a combination of
スラグ
and.
ロック
Also in the overworld is a sign pointing to the
災いの池
Pond of Calamity, which is probably named due to the Quake Medallion, Link's reward here, shaking the ground like a natural disaster when used. To get it, Link needs to throw something into this conspicuous circle of rocks in the water, which awakens a catfish who grants him the power. The Quake Medallion's name is simply
シェイク
in Japanese. Inside this cave is a hand who's one example of several NPCs who ask for money in exchange for information. Their entity name reflects this, with JOHOY being a shortened romanization of
情報屋
or information trader. The info this hand gives concerns a former bandit in the desert who's pretending to be a strange middle-aged guy. Wait, wasn't he pretending to be an average middle-aged guy? This is an unfortunate but totally understandable inconsistency caused by the translator having to localize such a big game bit by bit and forgetting how they'd translated the same content over the large course of time required for such a task. The Dark Temple is located where the Light World's Eastern Temple was, and Link needs to navigate this hedge maze to find the entrance. While he's doing so, a monkey called Kiki, named after the Japanese monkey sound, starts following him and asking for money. Ideally, Kiki's text would have "hoo hoo ha ha" interspersed instead of Kiki for the English version. After paying him a total of 120 rupees, he opens the Dark Temple's entrance. Outside are Dacto, and inside are Terrapin, or
パメット
Bari, and the smaller Biri, which are named after
ビリビリ
an onomatopoeic adjective essentially meaning electrified. Goria, which are simply called
ホッピ
in Japanese, referencing their mimicking of Link's movement, and Helmasaur, which are called
キップループ
in Japanese. Their name probably comes from the common Japanese misconception that the English word hip refers to one's lower back, and therefore their name expresses that, to defeat them, Link needs to loop around to the hip where they're vulnerable. The item acquired here is the MC Hammer, surely a reference to the rapper who released You Can't Touch This in 1990. In-game, M and C are clumsily intended to stand for magic. With the hammer, Link can make his way to the temple's boss, the Helmasaur King, or
ジークロック
in Japanese, and destroy its Starlin tank armor before slashing away at its face to defeat it and free the first of the 7 maidens. The stakes in the overworld can now be hammered down, which opens several new places to Link. One of these is the Dark World version of
動物の森
Animal Forest, which is precisely what Animal Crossing is called in Japanese. The Ocarina, which allows Link to warp around the Light World, is acquired here. Hammering this stake near the blacksmith, whom I'll talk about later, opens access to this statue, which summons a demon when magic powder is sprinkled on it. The demon reduces Link's magic consumption by half, while constantly shifting between polite and aggressive language, with phrases like
ざまあみろ
"That's what you get" and
よかったですね
It's rather splendid, is it not? Link's next destination is the Swamp Shrine, or
水の祠
Water Shrine. Inside, he encounters hovers, Zolls, Winders, Piragoose, and Cameron, which are simply named using the katakana spelling for the name Cameron. I don't know if this is a reference to a specific person, but it would be an odd naming decision if not. The item acquired here is the hookshot, which is katakanaized as
フックショット
which got re-romanized rather unfortunately in the game code. The boss is
ワート
or Wart, and its entity name suggests it's yet another incarnation of Patra for this game. Issue 168 of Famitsu likens its protective rocks to
プチシュー
cream-filled pastries. After being freed, the Water Shrine's maiden talks about Link's magical powers, but she actually says magical mirror in the Japanese version. She also mentions praying for Link's success in defeating Ganon, which got removed in English. Going back and talking with Sahasrara at this point results in him confessing that he is too old to fight. But in Japanese he says,
わしら
meaning we are too old. I guess this would refer to himself and Ajina, but I'm not entirely sure. Link's next destination is
ドクロの森
or Skull Woods. Inside the dungeon, he encounters Gibdo and Wallmasters, which are actually called
ホールマスター
in Japanese, presumably because these ones fall from the ceiling when attempting to grab him. The item acquired here is the fire rod, which Link uses to burn his way to the boss room, in which lurks Mothula. Its Japanese name is
ガモース
essentially a combo of the Japanese and English words for moth. With the third maiden freed, Link can tackle the fourth Dark World dungeon just south of the woods in
はぐれ者の村
the Village of Strays. Outside, Link encounters
ピック
presumably derived from pick up and pickpocket considering their behaviour, and
ヒュー
the Dark World version of the Poe, whose name resembles
ヒューン
the sound of speedy flight. The dungeon interior gets referred to online as
ブラインドの洞窟
Blind's Cave, but the official guide calls it Thieves' Town, with the apostrophe in the wrong place, unfortunately. Here, Link encounters Zarzak, Gibo, Skullrope, and Buzz, which the guide likens to
キリギリス
a species of grasshopper. The item acquired here is the Titan's Mitt, or
パワフルグラブ
in Japanese, with which Link can lift the dark rocks and skulls in the overworlds. A dummy maiden can be found in a cell, but she refuses to be rescued. Exposing her to the sunlight pouring into this room pains her and causes her to reveal her true identity, Blind the Thief, who is the dungeon's boss. Defeating him frees the fourth maiden, who reveals that Link may be the last descendant of the knights who fought in the imprisoning war. She then says,
その最後の一人が勇者となる力を秘めていたなんて不思議なこと
which the localizer translated to, "It is ironic that the last one in the line has the potential to become the hero of legend." But I don't think so. It's perhaps desperately fortunate, but not ironic. Therefore, I think a better translation here would be, "It is curious that the very last one has the potential to become the hero of legend." With the powerful glove in his possession, Link can lift these skulls south of the Village of Strays and free a frog-like character whose speech is interspersed with
ゲロ
the Japanese frog sound, which would later be used to name the famous frog conductor Don Gero in Majora's Mask. In this game, though, the frog is the Dark World form of one of two dwarven blacksmiths who live just east of Kakariko Village. They offer to strengthen Link's sword when he reunites them. In Japanese, they speak very casually, saying
じゃね
instead of
え、じゃない、
and
あんた、
instead of,
あなた。
which shows a gruff and or uneducated demeanor. Other overworld side quests include taking this talking purple chest to the man in the desert to acquire a bottle, and getting the bomb boss medallion, which is called
ボンバ
in Japanese. The magic cape lies in this grave surrounded by heavy rocks and is called the
ー、マジックマント、
in Japanese, derived from the French word manteau. Link's next destination is the
氷の塔、
or ice tower, which is, in fact, the opposite of a tower, in that it descends into the ground. Inside, Link encounters Freezaw, Pengator, Stalfos Knights, and Babusu. Freezaw's Japanese name
タイノン、
happens to resemble
体温、
meaning body temperature. The non possibly means not or none, emphasizing its ice-cold body. The item acquired is the blue clothes, and the boss is Cold Stare, whose name is
シュアイズ、
in Japanese, closely resembling
シュアイス、
which are ice cream-filled versions of Puchishu. The next dungeon is Misery Mire, or
悪魔の沼、
Demon Swamp, as this sign helpfully explains. Link needs to be flown here by the warp bird while in the light world, and then reveal this warp tile to access the dark world's equivalent of the desert. Outside the dungeon, he encounters Swamola, which are just called
モルドアーム、
in Japanese, with the entity name reflecting that. They're referred to as
ハサミムシ、
in the official guide. Link needs the Ether Medallion to get inside the dungeon, where he encounters Wizrobes, Slugula, Zorro, and
カランメイダ、
an anagram of
仮面ライダー、
which is a popular Japanese TV show not dissimilar to Power Rangers. The item acquired is the Cane of Samaria, and the boss is Vitreous, or
ゲルドーガ、
in Japanese, perhaps taking the Gerudo prefix because this swamp is the Desert Temple's Dark World counterpart. After defeating it and saving the sixth maiden, Link needs to head to the bomb shop, which is now selling the Super Bomb, a really powerful talking bomb. It's required to destroy this wall blocking a fairy fountain, where Link can have his equipment upgraded by this goddess. His sword can be strengthened to level 4, and more importantly, his arrows can be upgraded to the silver arrows, which are needed to defeat Ganon. With that done, it's time to free the last maiden, who's been imprisoned in Turtle Rock on the top of Death Mountain. Outside, Link encounters Lionel and Tektites, whom the guide describes as
カメムシ、
there's also this cave filled with spikes. With the magic cape or enough hearts, Link can reach the end and acquire the
バイラの杖、
The Quake Medallion is required to get inside Turtle Rock, where Link encounters
ホックボック、
and Chain Chomps, the former of which is likened to a traditional Japanese toy called,
だるま落とし、
and its entity name, D-A-R-U-M, reflects this. The Chain Chomp is called
ケルビン、
in Japanese, which is simply the katakanaization of the name Kelvin. Whether this is a reference to something or nothing more than a random name is unclear. The item acquired is the Mirror Shield, and the boss is Trinex, simply called
デグロック、
or Mega Rock in Japanese. The last maiden turns out to be Zelda, and with her and all the others' help, Link can destroy the barrier protecting Ganon's tower. Inside, he'll find the red clothes, which reduce the damage he takes by half again, and he'll fight Aghanim once more. Defeating him this time forces Ganon to reveal himself. And and flee to the pyramid in the center of the Dark World, the location of the Triforce. Link can follow him in to start the final battle, where he'll need to inflict enough damage to Ganon to make him start teleporting, at which point he needs to shoot him with the silver arrows. After defeating him, Link speaks with the essence of the Triforce before wishing for peace to return to Hyrule. Then, the credits roll. Perhaps the only notable thing here is the English text that reads "Fingerwebs for sale," referring to the flippers when the Zora Chief appears on screen in the Japanese version. This is likely a translation error made by the development staff, stemming from the fact that toes in Japanese is
足の指
or foot fingers. Fortunately, this was fixed for the English localization. And now, to end the video, I'd like to share some interesting things I found that don't really fit in with the game content. First up is a racing horse called Legacy of Zelda, which was born in 1988. Seems it inherited the legacy part of its name from its mother, Legacy of Strength, and I wonder if the Zelda part is a nod to the video game series, considering Legacy is similar to Legend. And finally, in addition to all of the religious references that were censored for the English version, is this picture of Link praying before a crucifix in the official Japanese guide. And with that, this video is over. Again, if you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, share, and/or support on Patreon. I also have a formerly known as Twitter account and a Twitch channel if you'd like to follow. I should be back soon with Lost in Localization, Ocarina of Time, but until then, take care and goodbye.